believes that somehow drug dealing in the name of fighting ideology is more despicable than the kingpin on his yacht in Biscayne Bay overseeing the day-to-day distribution of drugs in your neighborhoods has got to go. I would submit to you that any of our leaders who have tolerated in any shape, manner, or form the existence of any other nation that deals in drugs is as guilty, is far more guilty than the pusher out on the street. And there's some pretty damned heavy words, I should think. There are at least 2 levels of scum who warrant our scorn before we get to the drug lord and his silk suit and his gold chains. And of course, he is guilty too. And he is closely followed by certain people in the community who allow the proliferation of drugs to destroy our society without ever touching a gram of the junk. People who never think of themselves as being in the trade. People like you and me. The casual user who thinks it's okay for him because he can handle it. The friend of a friend who looks the other way when drugs are around. The DJ, the comic, the entertainer who makes sly reference to usage or even makes a joke of it. The advertising, the broadcast, the film industry who profit from these things. These are all far higher up on the ladder than the poor slob who uses the junk. And they, of course, are followed by the hypocrite who sits in judgment of another drug-dependent slob because somehow he can rationalize his dependency on liquor, on cigarettes, on Valium, on sleeping pills, on diet pills, etc. He, in other words, read that, you and me, we must come to the realization that we're just as bad as the distributors, in the sense that it helps to perpetuate the belief that it's okay to ingest a substance so long as it makes you feel good. And that is followed by the well-meaning but misguided soul who is looking for a quick fix to the problem, who fails through his own ignorance to understand just how we got to this point and what it will really take to get out from underneath it. Questions like, where would our military be better used? Which problem is more serious to the long-term welfare and stability of this nation? What kind of government there is in Nicaragua, or what in the hell's going on out there on the streets right here under your nose? Von Ortner, remarkably quiet. What in the hell's the problem? A little bit too heavy for you? Just a tad too much? Maybe you're one of those guys that would like to test innocent secretaries for drugs while allowing members of the administration who have winked at it for 8 years to go without any responsibility at all. I'm going to give those phone numbers one more time. 9... You miserable hypocrites. You miserable hypocrites. Well, that's a little bit better. There's still one left in Hillsborough. 990 WFLA. Stan in Clearwater. Stan, you're on the air at WFLA.
Yes, I wish that maybe you could get some facts right. Facts are that Cuba is more responsible in the Caribbean basin. They're communists also, you see.
Stan, shut up. We don't wink at Fidel Castro. We do wink at Noriega. We don't wink at Cuba. We do wink at Colombia. We call Colombia and Mexico and Bolivia allies.
Now...
Yeah.
And number two, Nicaragua, Daniel Ortega's brother and the cabinet.
I'm going to tell you again, Stan, we don't consider Nicaragua as a buddy and a friend. Do we, Stan? But we do consider Mexico as a buddy and a friend. Mexico, a country that is run by one political party, that is dominated by one political party, where nothing can go on without that political party's okay.
Let's talk.
Our friend, our ally.
You want to talk facts or you want to talk generalities?
I am talking facts, Stan. I am talking facts, Stan.
Let's talk.
I am talking facts, Stan.
Let's talk about all the drug busts.
Let's talk about all the drug deals that go on in the Bahamas. Another friend and ally.
Well, of course,
hell of a lot more goes through there than goes through Cuba, Stan.
Well, something you probably don't understand. There's illegal things happening in our own country, and
you got it, Stan. So that's why if we want to beat the drug problem, we don't go after people who are using it. We go after the people who are permitting it.
We went after the French. We went after the Turks. We went after the people that are our allies.
Bull.
We went out the
Bull.
We let.
Bull.
Pardon?
Bull. B-U-L-L.
We haven't. We haven't went by after the criminals are perpetrating this on our country.
Yeah, like our own administration.
Pardon?
Like our own administration. The time has come to understand what the real problem is. The problem is not communism. The problem is drugs.
Let's talk about in real terms, in real life. We're talking about the mafia. We're talking about them busting up the mafia, arresting 130-some members under Reagan. He's a law and order guy. He's gone after these guys. He's gone after the
Dan,
drugs.
what kind of drugs are you taking?
Well,
or are you just plain crazy? 99's Orrin in Tampa. Orrin, you're on the air at WFLA.
Good afternoon, Bob.
Afternoon, Orrin.
I have to say, you have me at a bit of a disadvantage. I haven't had a cigarette since 10 o'clock Saturday morning, so take it easy on me, will you?
Okay.
Okay. I, for quite a while, have advocated the use of the U.S. Navy and the U.S. Army, for that matter, into helping seal off the border. I don't think you can completely seal it, but you could, if we took what we've...
No, we can't completely seal it, but it would be a hell of a lot easier to seal the border of Colombia.
Oh, certainly. Certainly. And given the technology that's available in terms of interdiction and aircraft detection and so forth, that's on today's modern aircraft carriers and so forth, a couple of those strategically placed on the west coast of Mexico and in the Gulf of Mexico and so forth, I would say that they could probably pick up 80% of the unauthorized flights that are coming up, which are basically drug flights coming up from Central and South America, and interdict them. And again, that's a short-term problem, short-term cure of a symptom of a much larger problem. Certainly, there has to be an educational program to dry up the market for the whole thing, but that's going to take years before that's really going to be effective.
I mean, if I'm asked to support a war in some jungle because the people there don't have a right to a free press, then where in the hell is the war in another Latin American country where the government is permitting the drug trade into this country?
That's true.
Where in the hell's the war there?
Yeah, I know. There's a great deal of hypocrisy there.
I'm a hell of a lot more concerned about kids doing drugs in my neighborhood than I am about people in Nicaragua not having a free press.
Exactly. And what astounded me the other day, I guess it was yesterday, the day before, when I heard it in the news, was that now since they've already cut the Coast Guard back some $30 million or so forth, now they're
closer to $100 million.
Yeah, now they're planning on taking Coast Guard vessels off away from our shores and putting them over in the Persian Gulf.
Yeah, to keep the price of gasoline a couple of pennies lower at the pump.
Exactly. And yet, when Nancy can go on with a thing with her, just say no, but I mean, the stuff still comes in at the rate of, I guess the government admits to interdicting maybe 10% of it, so if you can just, do a little bit of math and you can see how much is actually getting in.
Astonishing numbers. Astonishing numbers that are destroying and ruining an entire segment of our population. But the problem, Orrin, is you see that, well, you don't see the drug problem all that much in white and middle-class America. It's kind of the darkies and the spics that have the big problem with drugs. It's their neighborhoods. And so I guess they just don't count as much.
Well, that's an attitude that's nothing new. That's been around for a long time, until about the 60s, when then all of a sudden, for example, heroin addiction came out of the ghetto and into the public eye, and then there was some action taken against it, and now it's happening now, whereas the crack cocaine or cocaine in general is now coming out of those areas and into to Carrollwood and so forth, and now people are all of a sudden waking up, but they're going at it from the wrong end.
Yeah, exactly. They want to test applicants who are applying for work at IBM to see if they're on drugs.
That's true.
Hey, let's test the turkeys up there in Washington, Republicans and Democrats alike, who do business with the SOBs that allow this stuff to come into this country.
Yeah, and that's an issue that George Asterisk Bush is going to have to deal with as this campaign goes on is his dealings and prior knowledge and so forth with Noriega.
It seems to me to be the most important issue, and why he is not being hounded with the question is beyond me.
That's true.
Mr. Bush, as Central Intelligence Agency Director, you knew. As Vice President, you knew. You remained quiet, and you actually even actively participated in the dealings with this man. Why, Mr. Bush? Why should you not be in jail as a drug pusher?
Well, I don't understand why the national press hasn't even worked up the gumption just to ask him the question. Never mind with the final push you just put on it, but just say, why and what did you know and what was
George Bush has done far more to spread misery in this community than anybody standing down there on Dale Mabry with a stupid woolen cap.
You're absolutely correct, Bob. Well, Bob, I'm sure you've got other calls. I have to get back to the millstone here. And as always, it's been a pleasure talking with you.
Thank you, Warren.
The situation for their future is not as good. I mean, there's no vocational program or nothing on the federal level at all.
Well, Dan, before we go and haul Bush off to jail as a drug pusher, let's also be real honest about it and be real honest with ourselves. Because before you start blaming the pusher out there on Dale Mabry or Central Avenue in St. Petersburg, there are other people to blame. Nice guys, really nice guys. There's a guy in Sarasota named Dan. There's a guy that does a talk show in Tampa named Bob, who are also part of the problem, who laugh at, who make fun of drug usage, who permit friends to use drugs, who maybe even use drugs on an occasional recreational basis themselves. We're all part of the problem, too, and we're all just as guilty.
Well, Bob, you're absolutely right. But another thing is, too, in this administration is that a few things that have come out of Washington, not only about the drugs, but just recently about even the way we treat people that have fought communists for this country, like people that might have an alcohol problem, I mean, people equate alcohol as all right because it's legal, but drugs is illegal, so it's not all right. But they're both really the same, in my point of view. The thing is, it is a disease, it is an illness, and here our judgeship is just as much to blame too, Bob. And yesterday, they really came out with a slap in the face, and it's just the whole administration stinks, and I can't see how anybody could even stand up and say that they would want to vote for what you call right-wing lunatics.
Thank you, Dan. I appreciate it. Rick in Largo. Rick, you're on the air, WFLA.
Hi, Bob. Boy, I'm glad you finally got on this topic. I've been following this since last summer, when, I don't know if you remember, during the Iran-Contra hearings, the two demonstrators stood up and said, what about the drug-running allegations? And that got no media coverage at all. But the thing that people seem to have overlooked, it has been reported, is that right in George Bush's office, there was a man, Don Gregg, who was George Bush's chief of staff, and by everything that's been heard in the Kerry Committee and that's been coming out since then, is that he was the man who coordinated and worked with the CIA, who helped set up the plan to allow guns into Honduras to help the Contras and drugs back out, guns into Costa Rica and drugs back out. It was Don Gregg who did that for Bush, and we also forget Jeb Bush, George Bush's son, who works right in our own state government, also was involved in that, and it's been publicized in the Nation magazine. It was brought up on some of what people like to call the counterculture news, but it's been brought up and it's only now starting to dribble out in the Kerry Committee hearings.
All true, Rick, all true.
The thing that really bothers me that people, they are so they say they hate communism so much that they are willing to sell their soul in this nation's future in that pursuit. And the one interesting thing that came out in the Kerry Committee, they said, why are they dealing with drug dealers? And they said, because all the drug dealers are ardent anti-communists, because under those kind of governments, they wouldn't be allowed to run drugs.
Well, the justification that is used, as a matter of fact, I heard it used on this station just this past week. The justification that is used by the right-wing extremists and lunatics and ideologues in this country is laid at the feet of a fine, wonderful man. His name is Barry Goldwater, who once said something to the effect of extremism in the pursuit of liberty is not a vice.
Right.
He did not mean selling drugs to your kids.
I would agree.
He did not mean that.
I would agree. I told somebody once after he said, well, I guess Reagan came up with the ultimate private funding for the Contras and all these other things going on. Just get all our kids to pay for it with drugs, And that's the ultimate private funding for these people.
That's what it amounts to, Rick.
That's exactly what it is.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for bringing up this topic, because I've been so upset about this and wondering how far we were going to let this country go before somebody really got outraged about it.
Thank you, Rick. Just a little bit too touchy for you? Ace in St. Petersburg. Ace, you're on the air at WFLA.
How you doing, Mad Dog?
Fine, Ace.
I think what the problem going on here is America's just got its priorities mixed. See, fighting communism, that's actually fighting a belief and a way of life that this country was founded on. And during the years that this country's been in existence, they've just failed to adjust to the growing problems we've encountered. And they don't realize how big of a problem actually the drug trade is.
I beg your pardon. The American people are very well aware of it. The American people are damned concerned about it,
but
as well they should be.
They're fighting the communism, but what about the drug problem? They got the priorities mixed. They should, like you said, they should be fighting the communism. Just say no. Why not use that slogan for communism?
You got it, and wage a real war against drugs.
That is correct. That's what they should do, Bob. And you have a real good show today. I'm enjoying it a lot.
Thank you, Ace. Carrie in a car phone. Carrie, you're on the air at WFLA.
Hi, Bob.
Hi.
I drive back and forth from Sarasota to Tampa every day, and I've listened to you, and actually your show is one of the reasons I got a car phone, because I've been wanting to call you, and I just never want to stop and pull over. You have a lot of interesting things going on. I'm a recovering drug addict myself, and I have some pretty strong feelings on the drug issue. First of all, I'd like to talk about fighting communism. I think we're in a clear area where a democratic country is being clearly taken over by communism. I think that's the time the United States needs to step in. But
I've never known that to happen.
Excuse me?
I've never known of a truly democratic country to be taken over by communism.
That's my point. And I think it's all so hazy and shadowy, and they're saying that the Soviet Union has their fun.
We have to stop. We have to stop sanctioning our friends and their use of drugs and so forth and so on. We've got to take it more seriously, because it is a damn serious problem.
Myself, well, I don't take light of it, obviously, because of the situation I've been in. I've hit what we call a bottom, and I've lost everything I had, and through 2 years of a recovery program, which I won't mention the name of, I've been able to get to the point where I'm commuting back and forth to Tampa in a vehicle where I can afford a car.
Why not mention the name of it? Maybe there's somebody else out there who just hit bottom this morning. Unless, well,
you asked me to mention the name of it?
If you want to.
Well, it's, the program that I belong to is Narcotics Anonymous, and that's what's been able to help me. It's a daily program of recovery where I've learned how to deal with my drug problem, face the fact that drugs are a problem for me personally, that I have the disease of addiction, and that I cannot use any drug, including the drug alcohol, safely. And it goes beyond that in a living program, and similar to something I've heard you talk about before, Overeaters Anonymous, which is an offshoot of Alcoholics Anonymous and all the Anonymous.
Right, they all use the same basic program. Get a hold of yourself.
They all come down from Alcoholics Anonymous, which is a 12-step program of recovery. And the bottom line is that you cannot use whatever the addiction is, whether it be food or alcohol or drugs, and it's a way of dealing with your problems and learning how to live now that you don't have a drug to fall back on. And I guess what I'm saying as far as where the money needs to be spent is certainly none of those programs accept outside contributions, because we don't want to have anyone have a say so in our organization. But I think that drug treatment programs do work, and they point people in the right direction, and most reputable drug treatment programs advise you to get into an anonymous program.
Of course, but again, it's only, while education is but one part of the fight, the form of education that you're talking about is but one part of the educational fight. You're talking about addressing the problem after the fact. We also need to spend just as much time, trouble, and effort, if not more, on addressing the problem prior to the fact. We've got to stop teaching our kids that it's cool to be stoned. We've got to stop teaching our kids that you can solve all your problems by putting something in your mouth or your arm, or whatever it might be.
Well, I think that's a good point. I think one of the problems is the government's credibility. I know for myself, years back when I first started experimenting with drugs, I remember all the propaganda about marijuana, I'm sure you remember the film Reefer Madness, where if you smoke marijuana, you'll bark like a dog and jump out 3-story windows, and all the lies that were spread about marijuana use. And when I discovered they were lies, I went ahead with the assumption, well, then I can't believe the government on any of this stuff, and how do I know heroin's really addictive? And actually, as it turned out, that's the drug that I ended up abusing, and that became my major problem. So I think the government's credibility has been lost since the beginning because of the propaganda they spread back in the 60s about drugs, and people are hesitant to listen to what they have to say now, and I think that's
the government's credibility is also seriously damaged when even if it's just a passive way, the government, for all practical purposes, is in the illicit drug trade. The credibility is damaged there as well.
That's an excellent point.
When Nancy and her husband sit there with tears in their eyes saying, just say no, while at the very same time as that particular program was broadcast nearly a year ago, her husband had full knowledge of a cooperative drug dealer that he did business with. That's insane. That's insane, and it must stop.
I think that too often politicians prostitute themselves for a goal, and it's the end is. Does the end really mean that the means can be anything?
Gary, I thank you very, very much.
Thank you, Bob.
Good luck on your recovery too.
Thank you.
Be good. Hi, Tom.
Hi. Well, I guess anything you're going to say now about what you're talking about today is anything I could say probably would just be full circle, but. You know, one thing, I think Emerson said it pretty well. He says, what you do rings so loud in my ears I can't hear what you say. So, you know, we're talking about all these programs of education to teach people not to use drugs. What are we going to do? Just forget about communism? You know, I don't believe that, but I almost think I can read into you say, well, let's don't worry about communism at all. Is that right or wrong?
It's quite wrong, Tom.
Okay.
Well, now, wait a second.
Well, first of all, you got me upset Friday, and I guess we can't talk about that.
Hold tight, Tom. If you want to just use the broad term communism, then yeah, we can just forget about communism. If you wish to use the term enemies of this nation, threats to this nation, no, Tom, I would not suggest. Well, no, it isn't in and of itself, Tom. I will point out to you again, Tom, that not one U.S. citizen in this community, Tom, not one U.S. citizen in this community has ever lost his life because of communist aggression on the streets of Tampa Bay.
Well,
how many people have lost their lives? How many people, Tom? How many people have lost their lives because of the evil empire of drugs?
Okay, Bob, I'll agree it's not a direct threat, not right now. So, you know, I think that covers that.
Well, I think then that you would agree that the evil empire of drugs is a direct, real threat, that the country has been invaded and that our priorities are totally screwed up.
Right. Yeah, I'll go along with that.
Well, then, Tom, we have no disagreement.
But our priority is too, why throw billions and billions of dollars into education about drugs when the very people who are doing the educating and getting the money are smoking cigarettes, marijuana, drinking whiskey, and the kids and the young people are saying, hey, don't tell me, show me.
Well, Tom, you bring up a very valid point.
You're right.
And it's also part of the point that I brought up when I talked about the hypocrisy, that the hypocrite is also. I swear to you, Tom, that more parents back in the 1960s did the marijuana and the LSD movement good than any pusher on the street by standing there lecturing their children with a martini in one hand and a cigarette in the other about the evils of taking drugs.
In the city of Miami, the Council of 100, the leading 100 men supposedly in Miami years ago, they had a young man come from the University of Miami, and they were talking about these kind of things. And says, what's the one thing we can do? And this young man, a young college man, told them. He says, well, you know, he says, you tell us not to steal, not to lie, not to cheat. You cheat on your income tax. You tell us not to take drugs. And just like you said, you smoke cigarettes. What's the biggest misused drug in this country today?
I'll tell you what my diatribe is today, what my bitch is today. It all started last evening watching the CBS News. Well, kind of half-heartedly watching it, to tell you the truth. And a piece that they had on about drugs, about the fact that the American people say drugs are the biggest problem, the thing that they're concerned most with, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And yet our government doesn't quite see it that way. Oh, sure, they talk a good game, but obviously from the amount of funds appropriated, from the amount of effort given, it is not exactly a priority with them. Then when you consider that our government, not just the Reagan administration, but what the hell, they're the ones in there right now, and they're the ones that have been there for over 7 years, have on more than one occasion looked the other way when their friends were dealing drugs, Their friends being, of course, anti-communist nations, in particular in Central and Southern and South America. It makes you wonder. And then there was this little bit on there from a congressman, I didn't even get his name, happened to be a black man, who said, not one person in my district has died from communist aggression, but an awful lot of them have died from drugs. Which led me to sit down and think about the same thing. How many of us have died from communist aggression? How many of us have lost any freedoms in the Tampa Bay area because of communist aggression? But how many of us have lost freedoms, have lost our lives because of drugs? How many of us are living behind bars on our windows today because of fear? How many of us are afraid to go out at night? Sometimes afraid to go out in the daytime because of drugs and the drug culture and the drug industry and the drug problem. Everybody always talks about, well, our priorities are all screwed up, and priorities all screwed up usually mean that I think something's more important than you think. But here is a particular instance where you and I agree. Where you and I agree. We have no choice to agree because it is a fact of life. It is all around us. And hardly a damn thing is being done about it. And so in a provocative manner, although actually there's a great deal of truth to the question, I asked in the first hour, who in the hell is more responsible for the drug problem in this country? Some dude down on Dale Mabry wearing a silly wool hat pushing little packets of crack cocaine? Or some guy running around in a blue suit with a red striped tie on who wants to be president, used to be the director of the CIA, is the vice president, had full knowledge of drug dealing buddies in high positions, and did nothing or said nothing about it? Who in the hell is more responsible today for our drug problems? The stupid pusher out on the street, or the guy from Washington who looked the other way because the drug dealer was also very cooperative in fighting communism in Nicaragua, where, of course, the average worker doesn't have the right to join a labor union or read a newspaper? What in the hell means more in your life? What in the hell is more important? This threat that no one has ever documented is a threat to this nation. Communism, where we spend hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars every single year, or the drug problem, which has already invaded our shores and has worked irreparable damage in virtually every single American's life to one degree or another, and where we spend damn near nothing. And actually, in an official capacity, capitulate to, cooperate with major wholesale drug dealers. There is something wrong. And I would simply ask you, if you was in charge, which problem would you spend more money on? Which problem would you be more concerned about?
Justice!
Good. Bob in Clearwater. Bob, you're on the air at WFLA.
Yes, how you doing, Bob?
Fine, thank you.
Listen, you hit a subject that's really dear to my heart. I'm a police officer, and I've been doing so for 13 years as an undercover agent working narcotics. You've hit a couple of real good points. One point I'd like to bring up to you and everybody, responsibility not only should fall on the government, but is on us.
Sure is.
Every one of us are hypocrites. Every one of us are apathetic to the whole situation. I look at this and I listen to people out here. I read the newspapers. I work the streets. I buy the drugs, and nobody out there gives a damn. Then I look at the government. The government says we're putting military intervention on the waterways to stop drugs influxing into the America, which is a bunch of garbage. I work with federal agencies every single day, and they're not doing a damn thing. They think that they can stop drug influx with about 2,000 DEA agents. They're out of their mind.
Well, Bob, your part of the fight is a necessary part of the fight, and I applaud you for it, but I also wonder, you say you've been doing this for 13 years?
Yes, sir.
I also wonder why in God's name you go out there every single day and risk your own hide and a lousy job that doesn't pay a hell of a lot when there is nothing done to to eliminate the problem that you're out there trying to fight.
Oh, without a doubt. We're only out there, Bob, to stop the legitimate person to get involved in the drug use. Not the person that's weak, but the legitimate person that wants to finance the money. We're just doing financial work. That's what we're doing. We're almost like bankers. We're out there to stop the loads coming in, trying to hit where the money is. You know, my feeling, you know, I could like to relay a little story to you that happened the other day. Before that, I get to that. The problem with our government is that we're wasting too much time in foreign countries and not putting our time and effort into the war right here in America. There is a total drug war, and if anybody doesn't believe that, they're out of their mind. There's killings in Miami, killings out on the beach area. Anywhere in the United States, there's murder over drugs. They're killing our kids, and nobody is looking at that as a war. They're looking at that as maybe a disease or a problem or a sickness, and it's an actual war. We need to put our military intervention, this is my feeling and my feeling only, because I work with and I see it every day and how it's destroying this country. But we need to put military intervention into Colombia, into Peru. How much economic aid are we giving these countries in order to finance our own loads coming here into Miami, into Los Angeles, into New York? We're actually, the drugs that are coming into this country are financed by us, nobody else. Our own government.
There is no one who has ever done anything in Angola to hurt me. There's no one who's ever done anything in Nicaragua to hurt me. But Mexico is filled with people who have hurt me. Bolivia, Peru, Colombia, you name it. They've all done things to hurt me.
Without a doubt. And the only way
these
we're
are
going to be able
supposedly
to
my
stop
friends and allies?
The only way we're going to be able to stop this, Bob, my feeling, and this is by me, my thoughts, is that we get a full military intervention, go over to those countries, take care of those marijuana crops, take care of the cocaine plantations. Unfortunately, after giving them warning, because what they're doing is there's a silent war, and these people are our enemies, unfortunately. I'm not saying that maybe the country isn't, but the people that are responsible is the country. And that's my feeling. But just to get on to one other subject, I had an interview of a person, I'll leave nameless at this point, and we're talking about educating the young, and it made me feel good after the interview. This person is hooked on crack cocaine. Person is 42 years old. She had a very good job. She was got involved with crack cocaine, lost a job, lost a business. She has 3 children at home, one age 10, one age 14, and one age 21. The 21-year-old and herself were using drugs, crack cocaine together. The 14-year-old and the 10-year-old got together and told the parents, listen, they're teaching us in our schools that this stuff is no good. Get rid of it, get it out of the house. Finally, if the kids put enough pressure on her that she moved away from the children, giving them to the grandparents, and subsequently she got arrested for numerous charges. But she was telling me how she was, the schools have gotten to her sons, and her sons were the ones that caused her to start to think. So hopefully, maybe in 10, 15 years, the education that's been involved in the school system will do some good. But right now, we're fighting a losing battle.
Well, in terms of the user, without fail, at least as far as I know, and as far as I'm concerned, without fail, the user eventually becomes a non-user because either they catch on that they're destroying their lives and they break the habit themselves, or they kill themselves. And how we get to the people who have yet to become users, I'm not quite sure. But I am sure that there is a way, and I am sure that we are not headed in that direction. And I'm equally sure that it's not just money. Money is part of the problem, but it's not just money. It's attitude across the board. It's our own hypocrisy. Yours, mine, as you brought up in the beginning of your conversation. That's also a major part of it. And also, if we really do want a drug education program, we have to start with ourselves.
Without a doubt. I agree 100% with you. And to the listeners out there that don't think kids are involved, I can tell you a story where I'm negotiating for a large sum of cocaine, and the person that I was mediating with was a 14-year-old.
Astonishing.
It's sad. Bob, I thank you very much.
I thank you.
Bye.
Take care. I was sitting there last night after watching the CBS thing. I continued to watch television. Morton Downey's show came on. He had on a real buffoon, Dr. Timothy Leary. Nice guy, but a buffoon. And his audience, of course, were on the other side of the issue and just as crazy as Leary. And there was person after person coming to the loud mouth, bitching and moaning, screaming at Timothy Leary. Oh, I was a drug user. You almost right. It's all your fault. It's all your fault, Timothy Leary. I was down in the gutter. I lost this. I lost that. It's all your fault, Timothy Leary. And I looked at my wife and I said, you know what, that's kind of silly. Why not blame Brewer and Shipley? Then we both laughed, ha, 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 ha. And that was a damn good line if you're not familiar with Brewer and Shipley. They did songs like, you know, One Toke Over the Line, a couple of songs about cocaine, songs that I played as a disc jockey, songs that I played as a talk show host. Well, it's absolutely stupid for the person who was on the drugs to blame Timothy Leary or Brewer and Shipley. But for the people who book Timothy Leary, for the people who play the Brewer and Shipley records, we're part of the problem.
From
It's very pre-recorded show. Hi, this is Mad Dog Bob Lassiter. It has been very pre-recorded show the last decade or so to talk about morals, returning to moral values, etc., etc. Earlier in this presidential campaign, one scoundrel was sent packing because he borrowed somebody else's speeches and delivered them as his own. And I think that was right and proper and fitting. A little bit later on in the campaign, another scoundrel was sent packing because he was a married man and spent an evening, maybe a couple of them, with a young lady to whom he was not married. Which, of course, enraged the morals of the majority of people in this country, and he was sent packing, and I can't really disagree with that. However, we also have another man in the campaign who it is known tolerated a drug pusher, big-time drug pusher, a man who is under indictment, as a matter of fact, in this country, so we have to assume that the charges are pretty damned legitimate. He's still in the campaign. He hasn't been sent packing. I dare say that if I could produce a picture of George Bush exposing himself to an old lady at a bus stop, George Bush would be forced to withdraw from the campaign. George Bush's morals would be called into question. And I think rightfully so. But why in God's name is he still in this campaign? What is more moral, showing your ding-ding or dealing with drug dealers? What in the hell is more immoral? You wouldn't hesitate a moment to throw him into the gutter and not to consider him if I could show you a picture of him exposing himself to an old woman at a bus stop. You wouldn't hesitate a moment. Yet I can show you proof that he consorted with drug dealers. And he's still there. There's something wrong. There is something awfully, awfully, awfully wrong. I don't know what in the hell it is, do you? Why is it that we tolerate this? And I'm not just trying to pick on George Bush. I'm using George Bush because he is a handy example. He is a very handy example, but far, far from the only person who falls into this category. The guy that's in the office right now. If I could show you a picture of him exposing his ding-ding to an old lady at a bus stop, you'd throw him out of office, wouldn't you? Sure would. Wouldn't hesitate a moment. That immoral, good-for-nothing, dirty old man. He's not fit to be the leader of this country. But I can show you proof that he dealt with a drug dealer and okayed it. And you don't want to hear it.
A month proclaiming that, hey, everybody should trip on LSD. Hey, everybody should trip on LSD.
Tune in, turn on, drop out.
You don't know yourself unless you do that. And there were prominent psychologists back then that thought that you should trip once in a while to get a grip on yourself and find out who you were. Our whole society image and idea of drugs, and this doesn't just begin and end with marijuana, cocaine, and heroin. What about these crazy doctors that prescribe pill after pill after pill after pill for women who are a little nervous, for women who are going through menopause, for anybody that's sick that they prescribe any kind of prescription drug to? They're drug dealers too, as far as I'm concerned. And this whole country, the concept is just as you said earlier, if you can stick it in your nose, you'll be okay. If you can shoot it in your arm, you'll be okay. Or if you can suck it in your lungs, you'll be okay. for a little while. And really, you know, if you're a person that doesn't have much to look up to, doesn't have much to look forward to, that few minutes or that few hours of escape, that satisfies you, at least for those few hours, and that's what we're looking for. We're looking for that instant gratification so that we can say, I'm okay, you're okay. But we're not okay. But I think that these deals that you're talking about that have been made with the Central American countries, and really it's Colombia too, well, do people honestly think that educators are any different? And I'm not an educator. I just wonder if people think that teachers don't care about money. They have to care about money just like you and I do, and they should be as well paid as anyone in our society. If you want somebody to teach you something, don't you want the best person available to teach you something?
Robert?
We're not getting those people.
Robert, thank you very much.
Okay, Bob, nice talking with you.
Be good.
They've been very good conversations. I was, well, still am, I guess you'd call it, a cocaine addict. And I was doing cocaine to go up and having a good time and doing 2-and-alls to go down. And after one rather lengthy binge, I'd forgotten I had taken a 2-and-all and went to work in the morning and started drinking and then took another one. We're talking the big 250 milligram 2-and-alls, which is a very powerful depressant.
Mm-hmm.
And I almost died. And if anybody's ever been injured seriously in an automobile accident or an accident where they've been in a coma, it's basically what I was in. But I was a walking coma because I was being held up by friends dragging me along down the street to try to get me home.
Happened to me once almost 25 years ago.
Scary.
Oh, really?
And
all you want to do is lay down, and you know if you do, you're going to die.
That's right. And thank God they were there to help me. But the one thought that occurred to me as I was starting to come out of it the next day was not so much that I was so much worried about dying myself or my own well-being, was that I kept having this picture of myself laying in a coffin, looking up at my mother and saying, "Don't go, don't go. I'm still alive." And it was that was my turning point. To not leave me there. Don't leave me to die. So I wasn't going to. And they were walking away. That's what really kind of woke me up. And then I got up and I went on to work that afternoon. And I've never screwed with it since. And I'm telling you, man, it was a spooky experience.
Yeah, it is a spooky experience, and I'm glad that, frankly, you had it if it's what got your head screwed on straight. But it's just a tragedy to think
I had to go that far.
That those drugs that you took are in essence sanctioned by society, sanctioned by the government, sanctioned by all of us good people out here who supposedly say we're so dead set against them.
The thing is, in that time of my life, Bob, when I was going around in that circle, it was the cocaine to get up and have a good time, and then it was so up that I had to take the depressants to get back down to where I thought was a normal level, and then forgetting what I had done, and then doing it all over again, and it just compounded. Man, I thought the road to hell, that's a circle, and it's one that doesn't end. And I'm afraid that until things like that happen to people that do abuse these, I'm not talking about the man that goes out once a month with his buddies and plays golf and takes a couple of tokes. I'm talking about serious drugs. I'm sorry,
the guy that goes out once a month and takes a couple of tokes with his buddies is what really helps keep the industry intact. Because without all those casual users, without all of us good folks out here, we can handle the drugs. Without us, then there's not as much profit in it.
Yeah, well, I could sure handle them. I could sure handle them real good. So good that I was having visions. And visions of my family walking away from me and leaving me there for dead when I was alive.
The fact of the matter is that you buy your cocaine and you buy your marijuana pretty much from the same wholesaler. And
Lord knows that's the truth.
And every time you plop down your $200, $300, or $400 for your marijuana, what you are doing is giving him the financial ability to import more coke where there's greater profit and less risk because it's more compact. So every time you buy your ounce of dope, But, you know, it's okay, man. It doesn't really hurt anybody. You know, it's a good drug. It's more safe than alcohol. Every time you're doing that, you're helping to finance another shipment of a deadly drug.
But you know, Bob, another scary thing about that cycle is that these people have seen this happen. The ones that I refer to so casually as the occasional golf smokers. They see this happen. They get out of the cycle, but they're still involved in it, and they know it. And they know it, and they just don't care. They just don't care.
That's what it boils down to, Eric.
Okay, my friend.
And so there is no war on drugs until we all care.
Well, I'll tell you what, I learned my lesson almost the ultimate way, and I sure am glad I did, my friend, because I didn't get busted. I got saved.
Thank you, Eric.
Bye.
One line open. Helena in Tampa. Helena, you're on the air, WFLA.
Hi, Bob.
Hi.
Let me talk about one big lie that's been spreading around by Jesse Jackson and many other people, that Ronald Reagan cut off the budget for the Coast Guard. If you want to call Transportation Secretary Jim Burnley, Burnley, whose agency runs the Coast Guard, he'll tell you that the people who cut the budget for the Coast Guard was the Democratic-controlled Congress. He told Jesse Jackson...
Helena? It was Ronald Reagan who signed the bill that cut the budget.
Ronald Reagan had to sign that
No,
bill.
he didn't have to sign it at all, Helena.
Well...
There was no one holding a gun to his head.
Well, all right.
And the fact of the matter is that budget that you're referring to was submitted also by Ronald Reagan. It was passed by the Congress.
No, the Congress has its own budget.
It was submitted and signed by Ronald Reagan.
The Congress has its own budget, and Ronald Reagan has his own. And
that's correct, Helena. And what the Congress does is that it takes the budget that the president submits at the beginning of the budgetary process and either rips it apart or passes it as is, or does a combination of the two.
All right. Well, now let's talk about Jimmy Carter. When Jimmy Carter talked to...
Why?
Why?
He's gone.
Oh, no, because you're blaming the George Bush of being in bed with the drug use.
That's right, and I have already mentioned that it was not just this administration, but this is the administration that's in now.
All right, let's talk about Colombia. I mean, you're blaming the Colombians because they're not taking a tough stand on drugs, and that we don't.
You're damn right, Helena. I'm blaming everybody.
All right, and they don't. We don't go.
Unlike you. Unlike you, Helena, I'm blaming everybody. I'm putting the blame where it belongs. I'm not trying to weasel out from underneath the blame, Helena.
Let me explain about Colombia. The Colombians took a very tough stand on the drug issue, and they allowed the government of the United States to send the National Guard and our troops.
Yeah, exactly. You're right. In a 2 or 3 day, highly publicized, filmed expedition that, of course, was over in a couple of days, and there hasn't been a damn thing done since.
Well, it did, because later on, the whole Supreme Court of Colombia was killed by the leftist guerrillas. And later on, about 2 months ago, the attorney of Colombia was killed by the guerrillas, the leftist guerrillas. And you say... About 2 months ago, the attorney of Colombia was killed by the guerrillas, the leftist guerrillas, and you say that you don't see any connection between the communists and the drug pushing.
Oh, no, Helena, don't you dare put words in my mouth. I said no such thing. I said no such thing, Helena. Ever, did I?
You said that...
Did I, Helena? I said no such thing, did I?
Are we going to argue?
No, you're not going to put words in my mouth. I said no such thing, did I?
You said...
Helena, you have 5 seconds to admit that I never said any such thing. Well, you took the trouble away from me, Helena. I'll argue with anybody, I will listen to anybody, but I will not listen to lies. No way. I can well understand being misinformed. I can well understand making a mistake, but I will never tolerate a blatant lie. And I have never said any such thing, in any shape, manner, or form, or in any way so that it might be construed as that is what I was saying. Did I, Helena? And the fact of the matter is, Helena, I am willing to accept the blame because the blame belongs everywhere. You are not. You're trying to hang it on Jesse Jackson, the most asinine thing I've ever had the displeasure of hearing. Because of your ideological right-wing politics, Helena. To associate the name Jesse Jackson and the drug problem in this country is ludicrous. May I suggest at your service, Alina? I think you'll find them far more receptive over there. Ramona, Land of Lakes, you're on the air, WFLA.
Yes. Hello, Bob.
Afternoon, Bob.
Afternoon, Otis.
The lady mentioned Jesse Jackson, which was, really a specious argument at best. I was wondering what, if you, I'm sure you have heard his proposal to, I don't guess he exactly said to block the coastline off, but I was wondering what you thought of that preference for him to, to just block off the waterways in the Fortway.
Well, that isn't practical, to tell you the truth.
Well,
It's not practical or possible. However, there are things that could be done with our military might.
Right,
that would help.
Those lines. I think basically that's what he was saying in essence, too, is, something to that effect.
I mean, I think that our military investment would be far better served, for example, by having 40 ships off the coast of this country blocking drugs from coming in than having 40 ships over in the Persian Gulf so that rich oil companies can continue to do business.
Well, I think they can do business anyway, but that's right.
They were doing business anyway. That's a good point.
Our priorities are a bit screwed up when it comes to that. And I just, it seems like to me like it's an either or. I know education is good. Education is great. I have a 6-year-old son, and hopefully I pray to God his might be the first generation that probably doesn't completely, do away with it, but he's already been educated enough and knows and is aware enough of what can happen. That's not to say that, he will not experiment, when he's at that age. But it seems like to me that something drastic has to be done militarily or, and I'm not all in favor of legalizing drugs, but just some way of taking them out of the hands of the people that control them and deal them.
Well, you talk about a 6-year-old.
Right.
I have vivid memories when I was a very young child, probably in that general age bracket, maybe 1 or 2 years older. My mother loved Brandy Alexanders, okay?
Uh-huh.
She really loved them. And my mother was a good mother, and she tried to spend a lot of quality time with her child wherever and whenever she could. And we used to play checkers a lot. And my mother would fix a pitcher of Brandy Alexanders, and we'd commence to playing checkers. And for the first 15, 20 minutes, she would beat me. And that pitcher of Brandy Alexanders would go down a little bit and go down a little bit, and Mom started to giggle and play checkers really bad, and I would start winning.
Right.
And we'd both sit there and laugh about it because this was a week in and week out situation. There was Mom on a Sunday afternoon getting tanked on Brandy Alexanders, quality time with her kid playing checkers, and after an hour or two, she could hardly move the damn pieces.
All right.
And I loved it, and we used to laugh and giggle. What was Mom doing? She was sending a real strong message to a very young, impressionable child. A message that to this day I subscribe to. I don't like Brandy Alexanders. I'm more fond of Black Russians.
Well, very much so.
What it really amounts to, my point is, and I'll wrap it up very quickly on my end and allow you to get back to talking. My point is, what it really amounts to is if we are that serious, if we really mean it, if this is such a terrible problem, and it is, then we all have to alter our lifestyles, and we all have to stop sending these bad messages to our kids.
Oh, I think so. It sounds cliche, but...
Message too. I just perpetuated the message as well, because here I am supposed to be a clear thinker and, a leader and all of this kind of good stuff, and I sit here and tell you that I drink until I get drunk, and I do.
Well, but do you, and moderation once in a while, yeah. I tie one on too,
Well, what's wrong with a tab of acid once in a while?
Oh, well.
Or what's wrong with, a gram of Coke once in a while? It's all the same thing.
There's that magic word of moderation. And how many people can do that? How many people can just moderate any type of mind-altering drug or any depressive or anything like that, and just do it once? It's the exception rather than the rule.
Well, I don't drop acid anymore because it was just too much of a hassle, and after a while it kind of got to scaring me.
Oh, believe me, yes, I know all about it.
But there are an awful lot of people out there who weren't as lucky as I was.
No, I have some people that have one brain cell working, and that's only if they hit their head against the wall once in a while.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Bob, I'd also like, if I could, to extend. I'm an entertainer, and I'm working at a nice resort. And I know you don't get out much, so if I could talk to your producer, I'd really like to do that.
Sure, I'll put you on hold.
All right, thanks, Bob.
Ability in this war on drugs. And we not only have responsibility to lip service, and we not only have responsibility to cleaning up our own acts, but we also have a responsibility to hold our leaders' feet to the fire. If it is really a problem, and I believe it to be, if it is really a crisis, and I believe it to be, then we must deal with it as such. In every way, on every level. Personal level, public level, government level. And we must admit and understand what the problem really is. Like any war, there are many fronts to fight the war on. There is education, yes, that's true. There's interdiction, yes, that's true. There's care after the fact, yes, that's true. But there's still additional fronts beyond that. Our attitudes, our behavior, the messages that we send to our children, the standards by which we hold other people. It's all true. And the war will not be won by just a handful of really great-looking things, you know, selling some helicopters and, of course, along with a film crew for a 2 or 3 expedition, or making bus drivers take drug tests. That's not what's going to win the war. It's not going to win the war at all.
Texas has a whorehouse in it.
And you can tell him once. Maybe you can tell. We're going to serious! He can't do that. Because, first of all, they would come and haul him away. And if they didn't come and haul him away, people would turn it off.
But wouldn't you think that a tie between drugs and the Contras would be good entertainment for the majority of the people in America? I mean, that sounds like good.
It's bad enough I smoked them, but I actually helped sell them. I beat that. Wasn't easy. And then maybe he could tell us a little bit about how he beat it and the suffering. And then maybe he could get up and the camera could follow him and he could walk over to the White House bar. And he could pick up 2 bottles and come back over to the couch and he could hand one of them to Nancy. He could hold one of them up himself and look at it and say, oh, we'll just make up a brand. This is Jack Daniels. It's my drug. I drink it. Oh, sometimes I have a bad day in the Oval Office. And I've conditioned myself over my 76 years of life. I've conditioned myself to believe that somehow this makes things better, even though I know it doesn't. I've somehow conditioned myself to believe that it makes my problems go away, even though it doesn't. It only postpones them. Every time I take a drink of this poison, and it is a poison, it's also an addictive drug, I kill some brain cells. Then maybe you could stare at the bottle and say, my God, wonder how many I've killed over the years. I wonder how great I might have been. God, I wish I'd never touched it. God, I wish I could beat it. Oh, I don't drink every day. I'm not an alcoholic. I only drink sometimes. I don't need every damn one of them I take. Stuff tastes awful. Did you ever taste this crap? There's nothing good about it. Don't drink it because I like the taste of it. I drink it because I like what it does to my mind. Yeah, what it does to my mind. It's killing it. Please. Please. If you haven't started, don't. It's not worth it. And then maybe the camera could pan over to Nancy. And maybe she's holding a bottle of elderberry wine. And maybe she could have said, I've conditioned myself that I need a glass of this every night before I go to sleep to help me sleep. It doesn't help me sleep. It's just what I've convinced myself. This is my drug. And like Ronnie, every time I take a drink, it's killing some of my brain cells. away at my liver. It's going to contribute to my death at some point. Gosh, I wish I'd never touched it. Can you imagine the impact that would have had? Can you begin to imagine the impact that would have had? Instead of sitting there sterile like, oh no, we're above this. As most parents do when they're talking to their kids, as most of us do when we take part in conversations like this. Can you begin to imagine the impact? We'd still be talking about it. That's all I'm talking about. Well, maybe the camera could have gone back to Ronnie and Nancy and they could have said, we didn't mean to admit that we helped contribute to this atmosphere today that makes taking of drugs, okay. It wasn't our intention. We never meant to do it, but we helped. And before it ruins you, we want you to know that you're going to make your own decisions, and most of you are going to try some kind of drugs. But we just want you to know that we're sorry. We, along with your parents and everybody in our generation, we're all sorry. And if there was anything we could possibly do to turn back the clock, we would. We can't. And so now it's up to you. There's not a damn thing in that bottle worthwhile. There's not a damn thing in that cellophane bag worthwhile. There's not a damn thing in that hypodermic needle worthwhile. It got to us. Don't let it get to you. Can you imagine the impact that would have had? Can you imagine the impact it'll have if that's the way you talk to your kids? I didn't straighten you out. Let's go back to the phone. Steve in St. Petersburg. Steve, you're on the air at WFLA.
Yeah, gee, it's great you're talking about the president. Did you ever go to Disney World and see that House of Presidents?
Yeah.
Did you remember that speech that Lincoln said there?
No, it was years and years ago. I just have a vague
where he said that this country could never be defeated from without. The only way this great country of ours could ever be defeated or brought to its knees would be from within.
Basically the truth.
And just what you're saying all day long, and boy, this is the truth. It brings it home, You don't realize it. Now, talking about what you would say to your kids, I had this problem as my kids were growing. And I was a beer drinker all my life and still am. When it came to the time, they asked me, a friend of theirs was over that night, in fact, who was on pot. And he was saying, well, you were drinking and I'm smoking. I said, yes, but look, I wanted to put a little correlation here. I said, when I drink, I go down to that 7-Eleven, I buy legally. That man buys it from a distributor legally. That distributor buys it from the wholesaler, and he buys it from the factory, all legally. I said, but what you're doing is illegal. The guy that who's going to benefit from this is not going to be some wholesaler who's paying some employees to work, and all they're going to benefit from the tax money to stay and everything. No. All that's going to go in the pocket is the mafia or whoever. And here's the way I put it to them.
But Steve, from a kid's point of view, that's details, Dad. Legal, illegal. A couple of years ago, your beer was illegal. Details. It's still the same damn thing.
As it is now, the truth. You're saying tell them the truth, but I tell them the truth that this time beer is illegal. Years ago, maybe it was illegal, but right now it's legal. And until the FDA or whoever controls drugs or liquor find that is legal, then it's maybe well and good then. But at this point, it is not.
I hear you, Steve.
And something else I was going to mention, would you also, in all this thing we're talking about today, would you think that there's big money people in this country, like, say, bankers or financiers, that are in this, as far as, where are these guys getting all this money to launder and everything? There must be some big shots that don't want to get hurt, and that's why all this stuff is being kept down.
Of course, Steve. I mean, up until quite recently, there were banks in Miami that did nothing, for all practical purposes, nothing else but launder money. And then, of course, the laws got a little bit tighter, so, you had to be a tad more creative. Panama, bam, what a great example of a country filled with American banks, a country with Swiss-type banking laws, banking secrecy laws. Those banks exist for damn near no other purpose than illegal activity and laundering, be it drug money or stock market money, whatever kind of money it is, for illegal activity, and a lot of it is drug money. American banks.
So would you think that these people are the one who are behind Reagan and Bush and these guys and tell them to keep their mouths shut? I mean, say a little bit about drugs, but don't go too far because then you're hurting us?
No.
No, you don't believe that, huh?
No, but, hey, bankers have always dealt with illegal money. If it's not drug money, it'll be something other kind of money. It'll always be there.
About the same discussion we're having all day long today with everybody you're having. Everybody always says this. There's always the big shots in it. There's got to be somebody in this. There's always got to be. I mean, who is this unknown person?
His name is Steve. He lives in St. Petersburg, and he's got a co-conspirator. His name is Bob. He works in Tampa. It's all of us, Steve. It's all of us, to one degree or another. I mean, when we can throw some guy out of consideration for being president because he slept around and cheated on his wife, and we should have, then how can we possibly wink at somebody else who's involved in this kind of activity? What we do.
So what do you suggest, that we should get to our representatives in Congress or wherever and try to get something started here to change this thing around?
Well, we might start at home tonight, and after we get our own acts cleaned up, then perhaps we might try to tell somebody else how to clean up theirs, because all of our acts are in disarray.
Right. Okay, Bob. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Goldsboro, 99.
True story that happened to us July 28th, 1952, when we were in Mexico, Veracruz. We were sitting on the patio there, and this very distraught couple came in and started to speak to us, and what they told us was absolutely horrendous, and I will never forget it. They had just fled Cuba in a boat that they had paid a man a tremendous amount of money to bring them from Cuba to the United States because they were being watched for years by the police of Cuba. They were prisoners in Cuba because this is what happened to them. And they came with only the clothes on their back, by the way. It was awful. They had been offered a job in New York to work in Cuba on the radio. I guess your type of a job, I don't know. And when they got to Cuba, they were brought up to the mountains, and they were held like prisoners there for years. What they did was, his job was, it had to do with the ships that came in with drugs. And his story went on, and I said to him finally, why don't you let the United States government know? And he says, they know, they are turning their back. In my diary, it says July 28th, 1952. The man told me not to say anything at the time. He was petrified. If they went on a picnic, the police were with them. The guards were with them. They could not, even in their home. And my diary says this couple looked lonesome, had dinner with the wife, Dutch, the husband asleep, had broken foot.
Why should that be such a hard story to believe?
Well, because 36 years ago, I was very young and I did not realize about dope.
No, Joanna, what I'm saying is, why should that be a hard story for anybody hearing it to believe? Because we know for a fact that in addition to our foreign friends, that our politicians, our lawmakers, our judges, our police, sometimes our presidents have had relations with people who are in the business.
Yes, when you're
Why is it hard to believe?
Because when you're young, everything is so altruistic, so beautiful, so lovely. No, your country couldn't do that. Your president couldn't do that. Your politicians, when you're young, you're stupid. You don't understand these things. And, of course, 36 years ago, we were all pretty naive about these things. And once I said to my cousin, who was head of a huge hospital in New York, and they were called down to have a big conference, and it was about dope. And I said, the communists want us to do this so that they can walk in and take over. If the kids are all doped up, they don't know what the hell's going on. And he said, no, it's not the communists, it's the mafia. And I was so young and so dumb and so my country could do no wrong. And as you grow older, you become so embittered and so disgusted and so fed up with all the garbage that you hear, these holier than thou, our little president, so holier than thou. And it's just sickening. It's absolutely sickening what's going on. When we were on board ship, I once said to one of the judges, who was very well known at the time, I said, all these dope addicts should be killed. They are ruining our country. And he says, oh, no. He said, no. He says, what do we want to do that for? He said, we want to go to the higher-ups, and the jerks knew who the higher-ups were all the time.
And again, taking it a step further, why should it be so hard for us to believe that this stuff happens? Because most of us, especially those of us 40 and younger, I have friends who are in the business. And, it's okay. We understand.
My husband worked with students. That was his livelihood. And one young man who came to the house to visit said, and he was a stockbroker at one of the big prestigious companies, and he said, "Oh, during the week I don't touch anything, but on the weekends I become stoned." And I said to my husband, "Oh my God, what the hell is going on?" This was years ago. And that was the beginning of the kids becoming, it's a normal thing. It's like drinking water.
Yeah, it wasn't the beginning, but it was the earlier days. Joanna, thank you.
Okay,
good.
bye-bye.
And those of you who are 40 and under, you know what I'm saying is the truth. Virtually every single one of you, if you had to score within the next 24 hours, could pick up the phone and do it. A dog last statement I just made. Well, maybe you don't know somebody who actually deals, but you know somebody who probably knows somebody who knows somebody who probably knows somebody who will get it for you within 24 hours. And, maybe, is it really any difference if you know a general who knows a colonel, who knows a major, who knows, you get my point? And you do business with them anyway? They're still in your phone book? Hi, Brian, you're on the air, WFLA. Hi.
How you doing?
Fine.
Listen, I've been listening to your program about alcohol and drug abuse.
Mm-hmm.
I think I might be able to add something to it. 6 months ago, I completed a 28-day rehabilitation program.
Mm-hmm.
I learned a lot, and there was 15 of us all together, about 15. I learned a lot from the program. But out of the 15 people, we've been trying to keep in touch with each other. There are about 2 of them that I worked on, that I worked for. The rest of them went right back to their old habits. And the cost of the program was about $12,000 for a 28-day program. So what I'm trying to say is I don't think the program is going to help people. I think they have to do it themselves.
We all have to do it, Brian.
Pardon me?
We all have to do it.
I know. But some people just don't understand how deep you have to dig into your head to make this thing work, to make sobriety work.
Well, Brian, the more I hear about talk about privatization, the more I hear about private clinics and private hospitals and private rehab programs, the more sick to my stomach I get, because what I hear are these outrageous fees being paid.
I agree.
And not enough success.
I agree.
And I'm really starting to wonder about them.
It is a figure. If you can look it up, that the rate of people who come out of them and stay straight is minimum. It's real small. They teach you maybe the basic backgrounds, or the basic know-hows, but they do not get you straight.
Brian, I think
90% of the people, when they walk out the door, are right back where they started from.
Brian, I wish you the best of the luck, and I thank you very much for taking part. One line.
Not this election, but the next election. You're going to find that people from our generation is going to get in there and they're going to legalize marijuana. Maybe not cocaine and the heavy drugs, but you're going to find out they're going to legalize marijuana just like they did alcohol, which is still a drug, but it's just a legal one.
So, what's the point? Is that good, bad, and different?
Well, everybody's pissed and moaning about, drugs. They already legalized one of them. So why do they keep arguing about it? It's just going to be a matter of time before they start legalizing another one.
Well, is that good, bad, or indifferent, Steve?
Well, I have no gripes with it. A lot of other people do.
May I assume that you're a user?
A user? Yeah, you can say I'm a user. Anybody that drinks alcohol is a user.
Well, how about marijuana? Do you use it?
Well, yeah. But all I'm saying is
you do realize, Steve, aside from what John Mayall said, every time you're holding, you're guilty of a crime, you do realize that every time you're buying, you are helping to finance the importation of even worse drugs.
Yeah, but it's just like back in Prohibition.
No, Steve, don't, we're not going to skip over this. Every time you go out and buy marijuana, you are helping to finance the importation of worse drugs. Doesn't that bother you, Steve? Well, or are you too selfish? You get off on the high too much that you don't give a damn?
No, I don't give a damn about the other people. They're crazy enough to buy it.
Then I don't give a damn about talking to you, Steve. Richard in St. Petersburg. You're on the air at WFLA.
Hello, Bob.
Hi, Richard.
I had a little drug problem around my house here about 2 weeks ago. My kid had paraphernalia, and I had him busted for it. And he appreciated that, because he wouldn't have got help otherwise. So, but I've never used it, never seen it. I don't even know.
Well, Steve, there might have been a day when I would bitch and moan and holler at you for doing that. I'm still not very comfortable with it, but sometimes I guess you've got to do what you have to do.
You've got to do, that's right. But like I said, I've never seen, or I don't even know what marijuana looks like. We've never seen it.
Did you ever see oregano?
Huh?
Did you ever see oregano? It looks like that.
Well, not really. I don't.
Even known some people to buy some oregano.
Well, some of the things I've been listening to.
Tried to sell some once.
I'm amazed at the way people haven't been able to learn early. I learned about alcohol 35 years ago, and it wasn't no good. And what I'd like to say to you, you said something as you're going home and get that rum and coke.
Mm-hmm.
Can you say I don't need it?
No, I don't need it. I don't need it. I don't do it every night.
Then why do it at all?
No, because I enjoy it. I enjoy it. That's the whole point, though, Richard. We've got to get rid of the hypocrisy. I'm not saying that everybody's got to become a Puritan tomorrow, but we at least have to admit and understand how we contribute to the overall problem. And we at least have to do whatever we possibly can to help the overall problem. I'm not going to throw away my cigarettes.
Well, I'm not going to throw away
I'm not going to put away my coffee. I drink coffee in the daytime, rum and coke at night. It's the same damn thing. I'm not going to put away that stuff. I can't. It would make me miserable because I'm addicted. I have convinced myself that I need the cigarettes, that I need the coffee, that I need the rum and coke. And of course I tell myself, well, just as soon as everything gets straightened out in your life, you can, knock these things off one by one. Well, maybe that day will come, but the odds are that it won't.
So, I've been through the mill, but I still don't drink that stuff. I have no use for it.
Richard, I thank you.
Okay.
Be good.
You've mentioned setting examples and not being a hypocrite.
Be honest with him. That's all you can be,
Right.
Jack.
Right.
I remember vividly, and I've told the story before, but what the hell, it's worthwhile, and it's short. The first time I encountered marijuana, I was 16 years old. It was on Junkies Row in Washington Square Park in the Village in New York. I was sitting there with two dudes. One dude said his name was Boris and fancied himself somewhat of a poet. And he had a beard and he wore a beret. The other dude's name was Bill Quinn, who fancied himself somewhat of an actor, though he had never done so professionally when he was at that time approaching 40. And they brought out a funny little cigarette, and they offered me a hit from it. And I stood up from that bench, and these were my only two friends in the world at the time. I stood up from that bench, and I said to them, and I shall quote to you, 16 years old, "Don't you know that stuff leads to heroin?" And I walked away. A couple of weeks later, after watching lots and lots of people smoking marijuana and not doing heroin, I started smoking marijuana. I'd been lied to. Don't lie to your kids either.
One point I wanted to make was I think there's a missed opportunity as far as our professional athletes go. I think the ones that you hear about seeing TV commercials, especially beer commercials or clothes or like the bars or something like that, there's people like Charles White, running back out of L.A., who has volunteered to be tested every day for cocaine because he admits to being an addict.
Mm-hmm.
Why you don't hear about him? The media... Oh, I don't know how to put it.
Well, how much more do you want to hear about? Do you want to hear the results every day?
Him to be somebody to look up to, not somebody who's a flashy dresser or drinks this kind of beer. Yeah, he's on the back burner. I wish he was a star.
Well, he is
I don't know
a
if I'm
star,
making
Jack.
any sense, but
He is a star. Maybe he's not getting the recognition, but he's a star, man. He's a big star, probably the biggest in the game right now.
No, I bet you could ask 100 people who Charles White is, and 90 wouldn't know.
Well, I guess it all depends on what your definition of star is. He's a star.
Yeah, okay, all right. I know. I wish everybody's definition was yours and mine.
Well, Jack, I never heard the name before until you just brought it up, and I'm going to assume that your story is true, and I'm telling you that in my book, that man's a star.
Okay, mine too. We must read the same books. Thank you.
Thank you, Jack.
Bye-bye.
390 WFLA. Sam in Dunedin. Sam, you're on the air, WFLA.
Yeah, Bob, the people that call in a lot of times talking about drugs and all the horror stories, you only get the tragic stories. You never hear from the ones that who enjoy the marijuana or the alcohol.
Oh, nonsense. I sit here and tell you how much I enjoy.
But they don't call in.
Well, I sit here and tell you how much I enjoy. Would you like me to tell you how much I enjoy tripping?
No.
Would you like me to tell you how much I enjoy doing marijuana?
Yeah,
okay.
tell me about, yes.
Would you like to hear how much I enjoy doing amphetamines?
No.
Why not?
I want to hear about the marijuana enjoyment.
Oh, it's great. Makes me giddy. Makes me want to eat. Love it. It's really great. And unfortunately, it costs me too much time. I can't be very productive while I'm doing it.
Did you hurt people?
Did I hurt people on marijuana?
When you used it?
No, I've never hurt people, period.
Okay.
I'm not a violent man.
Then it's way down on the list of priorities as far as the evils of our society would go, I would think.
Oh, I beg your pardon.
You beg my pardon?
Yes, I beg your pardon very much, you see, because virtually everybody I know who has ever used marijuana becomes a very non-productive person while they're doing it.
While they're doing it?
Yes.
What if they only do it
So they are hurting people. They're hurting society. They're depriving society of the benefit of their skills and abilities.
That's debatable.
No, it's not debatable,
That's another
Sam.
topic.
No, it's not another topic. It's quite related. See, just like when I go home and I drink my rum and cokes and I get the feeling good and I giggle. I'm not a violent man, Sam. I don't beat my wife. I don't kick my dog when I'm drunk. As a matter of fact, I'm far more likely to be pleasant when I have, a couple of belts under my belt. But again, I, like everybody else, when I do that, even though I don't beat up on anybody, I'm still depriving myself and everybody around me and everyone affiliated with me of my best.
But that isn't a problem that you're presenting upon your community.
Oh, I beg your pardon. I think it is too part of the problem. It is too part of the problem. That's one of the great bitches that we have today with widespread drug use. We got bus drivers that aren't as good when they're stoned.
Bob, let me interrupt you.
Yeah.
Bus drivers, mechanics, the people who put the tires on your car and fix your brakes, cab drivers, okay, nurses, they're the people that we got to test because wait. Their drug abuse presents immediate danger.
Oh, well, then we might as well do it as a talk show host, too, because talk show hosts might disseminate misinformation.
No.
That could hurt the nation.
You're low priority on the list, though.
Oh, I beg your pardon.
A lot of people are on the list above you that should be tested, doctors in the operating room. Yeah, this is immediate danger. And another thing...
Well, of course, Sam, one of the things that you're forgetting is that, just like with martinis, you can spot from a mile away anybody who has a drug problem.
Problem?
Yeah, you can see them from a long distance away.
What about the person who uses drugs that doesn't really have a problem, that enjoys it?
What about him?
Are you condemning him too?
Am I condemning him? I'm condemning everybody in this.
Oh, everybody?
Yeah.
Do you have infinite knowledge?
Yeah, I just don't understand why you want to select for persecution some people.
I'm not persecuting them. I'm saying...
I beg your pardon. If you're going to, across the board, test, surgeons without any knowledge as to whether or not they may be abusers, then you want to persecute a group of people.
Not persecuting at all. Job description tells you that people that put the brakes in your car...
Common sense tells you if somebody is intoxicated. You don't need a test. Common sense tells you if somebody's walking into walls, or if somebody is mumbling incoherently, or if somebody's eyes are red and bloodshot. Common sense tells you that, Sam.
Oh, I don't have any common sense then.
Well, if you can't spot it, then I guess you don't.
That's what you're telling me. Now listen. Those who cannot handle these substances should not use them.
Those people who can't handle them are insurgents.
Oh, come on.
Oh, sorry, Sam.
Now, your athletes and your teachers are on a low priority and your entertainers as yourself. If they're going to be tested, there's a whole lot of people above them that should be tested first.
I think we ought to start with you, Sam. You sound to me like you're on some peculiar substance.
Are you trying to intimidate me, Bob?
No, I'm not trying to intimidate you, Sam. If I wanted to intimidate you, I wouldn't try. I would just do it.
Sure you are.
Not Sam. Now you're insulting me.
Why do you want to win your arguments by intimidation?
Sam, you're trying to insult me. I get real distraught. If I wanted to intimidate you, Sam, I'd have no problem doing it whatsoever. I mean, you, frankly, Sam, are not my equal.
Oh, okay, Bob.
That's called intimidation, Sam. That's the way it's done.
A member of a gang up in Chicago. And this gang's sole reason for existence is crack and cocaine. And they turn some big bucks, Bob.
I'm sure they do.
But what scared me, and I turned as white as a ghost, how heavily armed these 15-year-olds up there. They're carrying Israeli-made Uzis and American-made rocket launchers.
Hey, come on, it's the American way. They got a lot of money to protect. It's a very unsafe world out there, Laszlo.
I'm telling you, and I think that, Reagan likes to, when he wants to take responsibility for something, he'll say it happened on my watch. Well, they took this war on drugs so half-heartedly that now they've got two wars on their hands. If we could eliminate crack and cocaine overnight, they've still got to disarm these guys, these gangs, and these gangs are prevalent. They're in Philadelphia, Los Angeles, Boston, Atlanta. I mean, it's getting closer and closer to home. Miami.
And to a degree in Tampa. To a degree.
It's getting here too, huh?
Yeah. Sure it is. Of course it is. I mean, you don't have to go that long in between hearing of a Tampa Bay-based shrimp boat being hauled in by the Coast Guard with X number of pounds of this or that. You think that's coincidence?
Yeah.
An isolated incident?
Well, it was during Reagan's watch that the price of cocaine plummeted from approximately $60,000 a key to $10,000 a key, and then crack, it's even cheaper. For $20, you can go see the Voyager for a little while and come back to Earth.
Well, we can identify it if we must come up with a label for as a historical period under Reagan's watch, but it's actually under your watch and my watch, too.
But you see, I'm kind of like George Bush. George Bush has this beautiful mansion in Kennebunkport, Maine that overlooks the water.
Mm-hmm.
And every time he looks out the window, he sees rocks, he sees oceans, but he doesn't see a gang member. You see what I'm saying?
Yes, I do.
And then finally this morning, it just hit me, there's a 12-year-old kid making $100 a day riding his bicycle up and down the street to whistle to the cops, to whistle when he sees a cop. So the 15-year-old kid with his Uzi or rocket launcher can hide back in the cracks. And this stuff is coming closer and closer to home.
Well, you see, what triggered this show was, again, going back to Morton Downey last night. It wasn't really the CBS News. That started me thinking. But Morton Downey last night, when I turned to my wife when people were beating up on poor Timothy Leary, and I said, that's ridiculous to blame Timothy Leary. Why don't you blame Brewer and Shipley? And my wife laughed, and I laughed, and I had got an instant picture in my mind of one toke over the line, sweet Jesus. Yep. One toke over... Driving that train high on cocaine.
Looking back on the tracks for the little green bag.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I thought, well, gee, it wasn't a couple of weeks ago that you played that Brewer and Shipley song to make fun of somebody that was being a little bit spacey, knowing full well that everybody under 40 would know exactly what you meant by one toke over the line.
Yeah.
So it's my watch, too. And yours, Laszlo.
Well,
you didn't call me up to bitch me out about it.
Being a responsible individual, I think that I can now answer a Ted Webb question last night. I think I know who I'm voting for this time around. It just made my decision a whole lot easier listening to your show today.
Thank you, Laszlo.
Bye-bye.
Thank you in more ways than one. Jim in Tampa. Jim, you're on the air at WFLA. Jim crapped out on us. Off we go to Scotty in St. Petersburg. Scotty, your turn at WFLA.
Good afternoon, Bob.
Afternoon, Scotty. Scotty, can I take 1 second of your time?
You sure may.
I forgot. Did I take my 50 break, Jim? I did. Oh, okay. Go ahead, Scotty.
Laszlo took a little bit of fire out of me, but that's okay. You also made my vote, too, today, and I damn sure appreciate it. And I just hope that the alleged liberal press attacks Mr. Bush the way he deserves to be attacked.
Well, Scotty, I don't really want to be accused of coming down on George Bush, per se. I use him because he's handy. Do you think you could really tell me for sure that you wouldn't vote for Dukakis either if I could come up with a story about how Dukakis used to sell dope to finance his law school degree?
Well, quite frankly, if Mr. Dukakis did, in fact, do that, I think that I could vote for him more so than I could vote for a man who obviously was in cahoots.
We're talking about the same crime, only differences in degree.
Well, see, I disagree with one premise that you made a little bit earlier, and that premise was that if I go out and buy a bag of reefer, that I am assisting in financing the other drugs coming into this country. I don't believe that.
Well, Scotty, then you're deceiving yourself.
I may be deceiving myself.
Pretty good against you.
Now, I don't smoke as I used to smoke. Maybe once a year I'll smoke a joint now. I'm 40 years old, and I used to be a very heavy pot smoker. And I paid my dues for it, big time.
And we all.
And consequently, I just don't do it anymore. Plus, I do get a hangover from it now. I know that I never believed it 20 years ago, but I do now. But the point of the matter is, it is inevitable that we're going to have to legalize or decriminalize or control, as we're doing with alcohol, because it's not gonna let up. Bob, you and I both remember when we were in our teens, when we were
Scotty, I'll disprove it to you. I will disprove it to you, Scotty. We don't have to legalize the crap.
Yes, we do.
And I'll prove to you that we don't.
Okay.
Scotty, cigarette smoking. Down, 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 down. I'm addicted to the thing, Scotty, but a long-term educational program going back, starting when I was in high school with little labels on the cigarette packages. It's having an effect, Scotty.
It has.